Hello everyone and welcome to the latest polling roundup for next UK general election for the Gavin Partridge YouTube channel. So here we go again, we're going to be bringing you more polling data. There's been a clutch of polls released. They had a very slow day yesterday. We did our last polling roundup on Saturday evening. It was a very late poll, but appeared late on Sunday morning. So we'll go through that, and then we'll go through the 1, 2, 3 polls that have appeared today as well. So far, there might be more turning up later, of course. But we'll go through the latest opinion polls in a moment. Just say that if you enjoy the content of the channel at the moment, please do like, share, subscribe. Thanks so much for doing that. We're going to be doing regular polling roundups right the way through to the next UK general election. So subscribe to the channel if you're interested in what might be happening in the next election. Right, so we're still very early days for the election, by the way. I think Parliament is now prorogued. So that took place on Friday last week. I think dissolution is going to be occurring this Friday. Dissolution of Parliament. And it's after dissolution that we will be in the general election campaign proper. So we're still sort of in the feeling out period at the moment. Right, well, let's go through these polls then, shall we? We're going to start off with Delta poll, and that's the one that appeared very, very late on Sunday. Delta poll for the Saturday night, I should say Sunday morning. Delta poll for the Mail on Sunday. So, headline of Labour lead of 22% in that poll. They found the Conservatives were on 23% and Labour were on 45%. Liberal Democrats were on 9%. SNP were on 3%. The Green Party was on 6%. And Reform was on 10%. Now, how does that compare with the previous Delta poll just there? So, the Conservatives were unchanged in that poll on 23%. Labour was also unchanged, but Liberal Democrats were down 1 in the most recent Delta poll. SNP was unchanged. Greens were up 1 in the latest Delta poll, and Reform were down 2. So all changes within the margin of error. So that one came out very late on Saturday night, Sunday morning. Delta poll for Mail on Sunday. Now, about 3 polls appearing today. The first poll is JL Partners, polling for The Rest is Politics. I don't know what that publication is. But anyway, they found that the Conservatives were on 28%. Labour a little bit lower than a lot of the polls on 40%. Liberal Democrats on 10%. SNP on 3%, Greens on 5%, and Reform on 12%, others on 2%. And that gives Labour an overall lead of 12%, rather lower than we see with some polls, where we did have the opinion poll at the weekend, which had Labour on a 14% lead. So there's about 3 pollsters, JL Partners, Opinion, and also Savanta, that tend to have slightly lower Labour leads, and that's more down to the way that they distribute don't knows and, make the assumptions of what don't knows will do in the end. 2019 Conservative voters saying they don't know, they kind of assume that they might go back to the Conservatives and whatnot. So I think that explains why those 3 pollsters tend to have slightly lower Labour leads. But that's like at the lower end of the Labour lead. 12% is still very good, probably will give Labour an overall majority, I would have thought. But as I say, it's not like the complete wipeout and oblivion for the Tories that a lot of the pollsters have shown. How does that compare with the last JL Partners poll? I'm going to try and find it. So there it is. Last time JL Partners had the Conservatives on 26%, so they're up 2. Labour on 41%, they're down 1. Liberal Democrats were on 11, so they're down 2 in the most recent JL Partners poll. SNP is unchanged on 3%, I think. Greens are unchanged on 3%, compared to on 5%, I should say, on the last JL Partners poll. And Reform were on 13%, they're still on 30%, so they're unchanged as well. So it was more of a Liberal Democrat to Conservative switch there. all within a margin of error, though, of course. And then we've had a Survation poll turn up today as well. That gave Labour a 23% lead. So Conservatives were on 24%, Labour on 47%, Liberal Democrats 11%, SNP 3%, Greens 3%, and Reform a little bit lower than some of the other pollsters. Reform on 8%. How does that compare with the last Survation poll, which was conducted on the 21st to 22nd of May? There it is, just there. So the Conservatives taking quite a hit, actually, on this Survation poll. They were on 27% on the last Survation. Now they're on 24, so that's a 3% change. The Conservatives down 3%. Labour 47% on this poll. On the last Survation poll, they're on 48%, so they're down 1. So Conservatives are down 3, Labour down 1 on this poll. Liberal Democrats are up 3. So it's all sort of swings and roundabouts, isn't it, really? On the last Survation poll, Liberal Democrats were on 8, now they're on 11. No change to the SNP, 3% on both polls. Greens were on 2%, now they're on 3%, with Survation up 1, and no change for Reform. The overall Labour lead was 21% on the last poll, it's now 23%, so the overall Labour lead has gone up 2% there. And then finally, we had a very large poll from Redfield and Wilton, and that's 12,000 sample size. Most polls are normally, 1 to 2,000. Occasionally we get like a mega poll such as you get there, sampling 10,000 people, but Miss Redfield Wilton has looked at 12,000 people. It shouldn't really make much difference. A lot of people think that if you've got a poll that has like 1,000 or 2,000 sample size or 12,000 sample size, but 12,000 sample size should be more reliable. I don't think it makes a lot of difference, to be honest. We'll compare to the last Redfield Wilton poll, but I don't think it will be greatly different. But let's have a look anyway. So on the latest poll, they found that the Conservatives on 23%, Labour on 46%, Liberal Democrats on 9%, SNP on 3%, Greens on 5%, and Reform on 13%, giving Labour an overall lead of 23%. How does that compare with the last Redfield Wilton poll from last week? Well, then that was 3,700 sample size, but smaller. But they found in that poll, the Conservatives are on 23%, so no change for Conservatives. Labour on 45%, but now on 46%, so just up 1. Liberal Democrats were on 10% last week, they're now down to 9% this week, so Liberal Democrats down 1. SNP were on 2% last week, but now on 3%. SNP's up 1. No change for the Greens, 5% on both polls. And for Reform, they were on 12% last week. This week, we're on 13%, up 1. So all changes within margin for error, despite the fact it's a much larger sample size. Overall, Labour lead last week was 22%. Overall Labour lead this week is 23%. But it doesn't look to be a great deal of movement so far within the opinion polls. We've had, quite a few polls now conducted since Rishi Coolby election for the 4th of July last week on the 22nd of May. So far, all the changes really have been within a margin of error. No particular sign of a narrowing of the polls there, I don't think. No particular sign of the Conservatives beginning to stage a revival. Not much sign of Reform dropping. I know, but at the moment Conservatives are trying to squeeze the Reform vote. There's no real sign there. I don't think that the Reform vote is dropping. All the polls are in line with previous polls from the same pollsters. So there's no sign of any particular switch from Reform to Conservatives at this stage. It is still early days, though, so we'll see how things play out over the next few days and weeks. This is how the overall polling graph is looking now, by the way, at Wikipedia. So Labour's actually ticking up very slightly at the moment. The Conservatives are pretty stable. They're not really dropping. Well, they're flatlining at a very low level. Reform continuing to ease off slightly. It is very interesting that the Reform the drop here for Reform is kind of coinciding with a slight tick up to Labour. So it looks like, if anything, it's more Reform to Labour that's going on rather than Reform to Conservatives. No sign for Liberal Democrats staging any sort of recovery or revival yet. Still very early days in the campaign, of course. Remember, Greens and the SNP down here are looking quite flat. And then this is an interesting graphic that has appeared at Wikipedia today. So this is showing where the Conservatives and Labour and Liberal Democrats and parties are compared to where they were in the last election. So this is where the Conservatives was in the last election with 44.7% of the vote in December 2019. They are now here at 24%. So there is a margin of error for that, of course, but a very large drop in the Conservatives' position where they were last time. Labour were just here last time, around 33%. They're now up here around 43%. So there's been kind of like a 10 to 11% change there. Liberal Democrats haven't changed that much. They've actually gone a little bit backwards compared to the 11.8% they got in the 2019 general election. Albeit Liberal Democrats usually put on some votes through an election campaign. SNP have dropped, so they was on 3.9%. Remember, just for Scotland, though, that not for the wider UK, but they was on nearly 4% of the vote in 2019. They're now down at 2.8%, so their voters more or less half, really. Greens are slightly up on where they were last time. So in 2019, they was on 2.7%. The election, they're now virtually at 6%. Labour will be hoping to squeeze that, of course, a little bit. And Reform, formerly Brexit Party, were down here at about 2%. 2019 general election, they are now up a lot as Reform and over 11%. So the Conservatives will be looking to squeeze Reform, and we will see Labour looking to squeeze the Greens perhaps a little bit. And as far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, they will be hoping to take some of the vote from the Conservatives and, pick up some tactical voting from Labour as well. So quite an interesting graphic, that, and we should keep an eye on that as we go through the rest of the election campaign. Right, that's it then. That's the polling roundup for this Monday evening. If you've enjoyed the video, please do like, share, subscribe. Thanks so much for doing that. And we're back with more polling data for the next UK general election on Thursday, the 4th of July. Which will be held on Thursday, the 4th of July, not when the next polling roundup will be well before bed, hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday. So more opinion poll data coming very soon. But if you enjoy the video, please like, share, subscribe, and we'll be back with more very soon. For this one though, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.